Hello and welcome to the Made in Romance podcast. I'm your host Sarah Bailey, and we also have my co-host here, Sab, aka SR7.
Sarah, hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
I don't even need to ask how you are. I already know.
Tired, and tired.
Same.
Yeah.
We're going to preface this podcast by saying if we don't sound very enthusiastic, please excuse us. We've both not had very much sleep today.
Yes. But we will try.
Oh,
We'll try to make this entertaining as always.
yeah. Although apparently we make things entertaining without trying, but
It's true. I think anyway.
so on today's podcast, we're going to be talking about happily ever afters and happy for nows, and
Yeah.
why they're so important to romance.
They are really important to romance.
They're like you can't do a
Can't
romance without them.
exactly. You have to have either one or the other.
Yeah, you definitely do. And actually, it drives me insane every time I see people kind of going, but why does it need to have a happy ever after? I'm like, because it's romance. And they're just like, but why? Because it's romance.
Right. It is yeah. Okay. So I have been on Twitter because writers are on Twitter. It's kind of a thing. And often I actually do see people say or ask, what does HEA mean? And I'm like thinking to myself, happily ever after. And it's quite simple. Happily ever afters, in layman's terms, is basically it's taken from a fairy tale ending, right? So it's meant to suggest that everything will work out perfectly in the future. Um, Traditionally, it's like often used after a couple's gotten married. And but nowadays, that's not actually the case. You can have a happily ever after without marriage. You could have it with a couple just getting a puppy, um, or a baby, or without a baby, just having gone through all their trials and tribulations and finally being together in the end is perfect as a happily ever after. And think I'm trying to think. Okay, so my pet peeve is when I'm watching a romance movie and I'm so invested in a couple only to discover at the end one of them dies. And I'm like, hold on a minute. How is this romance? Is it just me? Because I get really upset. I just feel like I've wasted 2 hours of my life watching this, investing, and they've kind of like blown it completely out of the water. Where's the happily ever after? That's not a happily ever after. Um, I think is it just me? Like, am I mad? I don't know. But when I like read book series, if like the first book in this series ends on a kind of like a they're happily for now, so it's like they've gone through one struggle, they're together, but there's impending struggle in the next books. I'm happy for that. Like I know that they're going to still be together, but they still got a lot of shit to go through before they actually retire. I call it retire, where they get married and they have kids and there's no more difficulties. There's no difficulties in their foreseeable future. So that's where I can accept that it's happily for now. But I can't deal with tragedies. I think the only one, if I'm honest, that I can deal with. And yeah, there's probably people who are going to disagree with me. I think Sarah, you might disagree with me on this, but Titanic, I stand by that movie. I love that movie immensely.
Yeah, we won't go into why I hate Titanic, but
Are you sure? Like, are you sure you don't want to go into it? Because I'm sure people are going to be like, why don't you like Titanic, Sarah?
okay, but then it's explaining the dumbest reason why I don't. Okay, no, it's actually not the dumbest reason why don't like Titanic. Right, when I was at when I people might not know this about me, but I have a degree in history, which I did via distance learning. And one of my modules was in film and television history. And I have obviously, before this, seen Titanic. And one of the reasons I didn't like Titanic is because I really, really, really hate Leonardo DiCaprio. like with a passion. I will not watch any film that has him in it because I cannot stand his face. Even though I know he's a decent actor now, but when he was in his kind of early days, he was fucking terrible, quite frankly. And anyway, we won't go into further hatred of Leonardo DiCaprio. And I had to repeat. Then when I came around to do this freaking module, it had bloody Titanic in it, and I had to do an essay on Titanic, and I was like, "Are you for real?" So I had to kind of put my bias aside of not liking the film and analyze it, and that just made it 100 times worse. Like, because I actually didn't want to say anything nice about it. And yes, one of the reasons I don't like Titanic is obviously it's not a romance, people. This is a fucking tragedy. A tragedy can be a love story, but it's not romance. Anyway, I just can't stand Titanic because I had to actually analyze the film, and that just made it worse. So yeah, there you go. There's why I hate Titanic.
You and I are so different in our views on this, because I, for one, absolutely adore Leonardo DiCaprio, and yeah, we're just agree to disagree on that one. But you know what? I have to say, I can watch Titanic 50,000 times, and it will always do something to my heart. I don't know. I know it's a tragedy, and I know that it tears me in two that Jack dies. But I don't know. I kind of feel like in some way they kind of recovered it and kind of lessened the wound in the end with having Rose reunited with him in, like, I don't know whether they refer to it as she was dreaming or she died peacefully at the end of the movie, and in her death she was reunited with him and everyone who had died in the Titanic who she was close to on the ship. But for me, that kind of lessened the blow, the fact that I got to see them and they were reunited in that way. It was just nice. I don't know. I'm smiling because it just gets me every time. I'm just really going through stuff at the moment, emotional stuff. The fact I've had lack of sleep, I'm just like here talking about Titanic. But no, we're talking about happily ever afters and happy now.
And Titanic is not a romance, people.
My
At least
bad.
it's not genre fiction romance anyway. Because there is and I think I'm getting to the point where I'm getting kind of frustrated with people not understanding why a romance has to have a happy ever after. I'm just like, because you don't go through a journey of a couple, finding their way to each other through all of their trials and tribulations, only to have it ripped away from them. Because it's just depressing, people. That is depressing. We don't read romance to be depressed. Yes, they can go through horrible things, and tragic shit, but the end of the story has to be happy, because that's the whole point of a romance. And I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I see these people on Twitter like, I'm going to write a romance, but I'm going to buck the, well, there's that bloody word, I can't think of it. They're like, I'm going to not have it have a happy ending. And I'm like, that's not a romance then. And don't market it as a romance either, because you're lying to your readers. That's another thing.
It's deceit, really.
It is.
It's false advertising. Readers
Exactly.
are not going to be happy with that whatsoever. And I have seen that actually, and it has frustrated me a lot.
Yeah, readers will come at you if you don't give them what they're wanting. And then people go, but it's, if you know what's going to happen at the end, if you know the couple's going to be together, how is that an element of surprise there? And I'm like, because we don't really think about that when you're reading the book. Yes, in our subconscious, we know that they're going to be happy at the end. But that's not really about that. It's about the journey.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you want to see it.
So that when you get to that ending, you feel like you've gone on a journey and they deserve to have that happy ever after.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's very true.
It's not really about the end of the book. It's about the couple's journey. And that's more actually, in some ways, really important, where, distinction is that you don't, we might know that the couple's going to be together at the end, but half the time, if a writer's good at writing romance, you begin to question it during the book, because you're like, how are they going to get back together? How are they going to get through this? How is this going to happen? How is the writer going to do this? And that's what I love about romance, is that you can have, there are so many options and ways to get to that happy ever after, that sometimes I sit there going, I don't even know how this author is going to give them a happy ever after right at this moment. So I say to people who say that it is predictable, screw you, because I just don't read romance then. If you don't, it's like, I don't understand why people have to go about trashing on this genre just because it, you know, let me tell you, it is not easy to write a love story or a romance and have people believe in your characters and want them to be together at the end. Because, you know, it's not some simple thing to write livable romance. My 2 cents on the subject.
Do you know what like really gets to me? When I see romance authors who are well known for being a romance writer, which means that every book that they write is romance, which means that by default, all of those books have a happily ever after. So what frustrates me is when I see people comment on like an author's post about a release or an upcoming book, or like something that's had 50,000 amazing reviews, and be like, I really want to read this. Does it have happily ever after? And I'm like, what? About, of course it has a happy ever after. It's not. I just, to me that's mind boggling. To me that's just a stupid question, to put it bluntly. I just find that ridiculous. And then people actually respond and say, yeah, it is a happy ever after. But I'm like, of course it's going to be a happy ever after. And
You know,
yeah, it frustrates me so much. Oh gosh, I don't know. I get really annoyed.
you know what I think that is because too many people have been tricked into thinking that a book that a romance they're going to read has a happy ever after, and then it doesn't. And that is the fault of the authors who advertise their books incorrectly. That's one why I'm going to put that out there.
It's really disappointing to know that authors have kind of betrayed readers in that way. I don't know. I'm so conflicted, because you know what books I'm going to bring up, right? One of the authors that you and I love. Well, it's kind of partial now, but that duet book.
Yes.
So for me, it was a huge coming of age, epic love story where, and because it was done in two parts. It was like book one and then book two. It wasn't it I don't know how to describe it, because it was pure love, but it ends in tragedy. And I just don't know how I feel about it,
I don't think that is not a. But that's the thing. That's not a. I don't consider that a romance for that reason, because it doesn't have a happy ever end. It doesn't have a happy ever after with them being together. Yes, we've gone on this journey of it is a love story, but it's not it isn't a romance. Like, if you use the strict definition of what a romance has to include, it doesn't fall into that category, I'm afraid to say.
No, that's fine. I totally get it. I was going to ask, you've written quite a lot of books, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And for every book that you write, you guarantee a happily ever after. But I think my question is, how, when you think, okay, you're not a plotter, so probably I'm asking this question in vain because it's probably not appropriate. But I think, you write dark romance, right? So I think I've seen this quite often in social media, where, because I don't think some people don't quite understand dark romance and how it works. I think they kind of assume that there's going to be tragedy in the end because of that word, dark, in it. And also probably they don't agree with the whole nature of dark romance in that often it can be about a woman getting taken from her family or whatever, and falling in love with her captors, kind of like a Beauty and the Beast thing. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you think you would ever write a book where there is a happily for now instead of a happy ever after? You've done a lot of cliffhangers recently.
I think that's kind of a different cliffhangers is a whole different ballgame. Happy for now, I don't have an issue with happy for nows, but I don't think I would personally write one unless I was doing like I don't really know that I would write one because that's not really my MO. Because I write if I do a series of books that's about the same couple, then I will usually leave the books on the cliffhanger as opposed to happy for now. Just because in the nature of my subgenre, that it tends to be the case, and I'm following the kind of tropes or the kind of things of my genre. Whereas if I was to write something in a different subgenre, I might think about doing a happy for now, but I don't know. I don't think I would do. I honestly don't. I don't have any plans to write like that. I will never say never, but it's not really my. I don't know.
Fine, that's cool.
It's not something that I've ever really kind of gone. Yeah, I want to write happy for now. Like that's not. I don't know.
You've just made me think actually about something else that kind of frustrates me when I'm reading a book series about the same couple. So let's say there's like 4 books or 5 books about the same couple,
Yeah.
and they end on cliffhangers. I get really bored and frustrated where we're on book 3 now, and the couple are like crazy in love with each other, and it's like a whole book where they just continuously tell each other they love them. Because then I'm like, but we still have book 4 and 5 to get through. And it's kind of like, I don't feel like there's anything more to it. Because I don't know, maybe I grew up reading romance books where it's like they don't find love straight away, okay? So it's like they have to work on their relationship. They have to have a friendship. They work into a relationship. Something happens. They realize that they're in love with each other, and then they tell each other that they love each other, and then it's happily ever after. That's kind of like the standard. What am I trying to say? That's kind of like
It's a story arc. It's a specific
that's
story
it.
arc.
Thank you. Specific story arc, right? So that's what I've kind of grown up reading, and for me personally, that's what I love about romance, is that you see that story, that journey, as you said, and the happily ever after in the end is so much. It's deserving, it's rewarding for us. But in terms of like a long series where it's the same couple, um, I would rather they hold out in professing their love for one another and having like a whole book of just being blissfully happy, and then tragedy strikes where they're separated and then they have to go through it again. It's kind of like boring for me. Yeah, it's boring is what I'm trying to get at. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I just feel like, okay, yeah, we get it now. You love each other. That's not going to stop. You can't stop loving each other. That's what's going to happen. But it's like, I don't know if many authors do it, where they just have pages and pages of sex and intimacy, and it just becomes too much. I'm very much, it's just maybe my preference as a reader, but it's like by the time I get to book 5 and that happily ever after is there, I'm just like, you could have easily have had the happily ever after in book 3. You could have easily have just stopped at book 3, because at that point, that was when I was like at my happiest moment with the characters having finally told each other they loved each other and that they wanted a future with each other, and then leave it there. But then by the time it's book 5, I just feel like, oh, I'm sick of you guys. Sick of you guys doing this. Kind of feels a bit flat. It doesn't happen often where I come across a series like that, but kind of like that. I don't know. I just felt like I needed to get that out there and off my chest, that I love romance. I love it. But there's a point where it becomes a bit too full on and just yeah. I
think
know.
that's kind of a slight failure on the author's part, as well as it. That's probably one, your preference, but two, I think if you're going to write a book series like that, you need to introduce something like a secondary love story when you, because otherwise, I don't really have an issue with like romances where the couple is already like an established couple. And then you're just seeing them happy. But if you're going to do that in a series like on book 3 or whatever, then you need to introduce a secondary romance into the story so that you have that kind of interest there of the romance between these characters. And it's like, we're not going to specifically discuss like a mass amount of this, but when I was writing, well, obviously, as you've read the my sci-fi stuff, and in the second book, they are an established couple, but the way I've written it is that the outside conflict, there is conflict in their romance, and they've already kind of said they have actually ended up saying I love yous, but there's so much conflict going on around them and on the outside and inside their relationship that even though they are as an established couple and they've said I love you, it's not the same, because you've actually given them conflict on both sides. And I think that's quite an important part of writing a romance or along a long length of time. If you're going to get the couple together, you have to give them some kind of conflict within their relationship and outside of their relationship if you're not going to do a secondary romance.
Exactly.
And I think that's
I agree. I do.
And that's the fate. People can love each other, but you can still have problems in your relationship. And I think if you don't introduce those, the happy ever after doesn't become rewarding, because you're just like, it as you said, it is boring to just see them being happy and like, yay, like, yes, it's great and everything. But at that point, I'm going to want the story to end because they don't have any, there's no conflict.
There has to be conflict. I myself have that in my pirate series, which no one knows about because I haven't finished it. But I have that aspect of, you see a couple happy and they have an established relationship, but there is a fuckload of conflict, so that there's a lot that they need to continue to work on. It's not like there's just a whole book of that and then there's going to be like another book where there's no other conflict. It's just going to be boring. I think what I mean is there's just a point where you need to have something else happening. There has to be something else happening, otherwise it's just so I agree with you.
And like that was one of the things when I was like doing the Devil's Syndicate in the last book, because obviously at that point everything is now established that they're all 5 of them in a relationship. I had to work out how to make, and all of it was external, and I was like, they have to have some kind of an internal conflict between the 5 of them, otherwise this is going to be boring. So I did introduce some conflict in there, and then I was like, then it was fine. And that, even though everything mostly was external conflict, it's important that you have some sort of conflict going on. Otherwise, there's just going to be, like you said, it is boring and it's not interesting, and you just want the romance to end. And if you're doing a romance, if you're writing a romance, you have to still have that couple be a big part of the center stage, because one of the things about romance books is the plot is about the couple. That is the plot, the development of their relationship. Everything else is actually, you can have obviously other main plots, but that's the central plot, is the couple. So if they're not still going on a journey, in the other books with their relationship in some way, then you're not going to be invested in it anymore. And I think so, then therefore your happy ever after feels a bit cheap, because you're like, well, they've been happy for 3 books. Why the fuck should I care they're getting happy ever after now?
Yeah, that's true.
So for me, that is a failure on the author's part to plot their book or make a compelling plot between the 2 characters, because if you're not going to be interested in it, then what's the fucking point? Like, I'm sorry, that sounded harsh, but
No, it's okay. I just remembered what it is that I actually initially wanted to ask you about your series, but I think I completely failed because my brain isn't working properly. Yeah, so all the books that you've written, when you decide, that you want to give your characters a happily ever after, what for you is a happy ever after? Is it solely dependent on your characters and what they want, or do you have it in your mind like, I want them to get married, or I want them to have children? Because my mind immediately goes for marriage and children, or flash forward to the future where they already have like 2 kids or something like that. But I think for you, because I've read a lot of your books, they're all slightly different, but I know that you don't plan things. But I guess I just want to know for you,
what is a happy ever after?
Yeah.
A happy ever after for me depends on the couple.
Yeah.
Because I know that traditionally romance included marriage and babies, and it had to be marriage and babies. But I think I really started getting into, obviously, as we know, I started reading romance when I was a teenager, but I wasn't really that fully into romance. I was more into fantasy. And so then I didn't start reading like proper contemporary romances until I was an adult. And then I was never in the kind of thing of where a happy ever after had to be marriage and babies. So my journey with romance is different, because I didn't get stuck with the idea that happy ever after should be marriage and babies. So for me, I've always been, well, it's the couple who needs to be happy and not every couple wants to get married. Not every couple wants to have babies. Not every couple wants those things. And I always want to make it realistic for that couple. So I haven't always had them get married. I haven't always had them have babies right at the end of the book or anything like that. And actually, in one of my books, I made them, they got married in book 2. So,
which one was that? I can't even remember.
In the Corrupt Empire, they get married. They
get
married at the end of book 2.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
But that was because that was the way that it worked for that book, and it wasn't. And then we don't see their wedding until book 3, but they are married at the end of book 2. And I think for me, it really does depend on the story and the couple. And that's like, I don't always want to give them marriage and babies. Like the Devil's Syndicate, they can't get married, like, because it's illegal for the 5 of them to get married. So I was like, well, I have to be practical about this. And, and I think they kind of got to the point where they're like, none of them really wanted to be married, because it wasn't, I think one of them says, if we can't all get married, then I don't think it's fair that one of us should be married to her, type thing. And I think that was kind of like, I'm trying to work within the bounds of realisticness, and not everyone wants marriage. And I think that's actually nice to see that the diverse reasons, not diverse ways in which people can have a happy ever after is more interesting to me than continually seeing this thing of marriage and babies, because marriage and babies isn't always everyone's ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Lots of women don't want to have babies.
Mm.
You know, that's a real thing in life. So there's a lot of women who don't want kids, and that should be fine and acceptable. And I think that we should see that represented in our fiction. Not everyone wants to have a marriage. You know, maybe just want to be together. Like, which book? In Promises, James and Ellie don't get married and they don't have babies.
Oh, it was such a lovely ending.
But they are together.
Yeah.
And they, you know, and the way that the book ended, they were together. And I was like, well, they're kind of quite young. They're 20, 23, 24. And they're not ready to take that step in their relationship. So I was like, I'm not going to force this marriage on, because I knew I was going to be writing further books for James's sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I can kind of tell them right at the end of that where those couples have all ended up. I knew I was going to write an epilogue with where the couples had all ended up, which you have not read it yet.
Okay, all right.
But they also still haven't got married at that point, and I have to say, and they're not had babies. So there is various ways of people getting married. But again, I strongly believe it depends on the couple, and I don't ever want to force my characters into this box of you have to be married and have children. Like, yes, I've given lots of marriages. Several people have got married. Some people have had babies. You know, sometimes they flash forward into the future and you can see happy where they are. And then, like, you know, but it was like with the Benson siblings, Dante and Leora were engaged at the end of the book. They get married in James's book, and then they have a baby in the last book.
Yeah.
And it's like, but they're not the central couple of the other books, but you can see they did have their happy ever after in their book, but then you can continue to see them having their happy ever after in the subsequent books. And I think that's quite nice to do in a way.
Yeah, I like books that do that. It's really lovely.
And then, you know, with Aidan and Avery, they were married and happy at the end, but we don't see that they've had kids until you've read the Benson siblings. So again, it's like you can, if you're doing like a universe of characters, you can actually then tell their stories subsequently and show that they're still happy together, or in some cases have problems with their relationship.
Yeah, that's true.
And so yeah.
So I was gonna
have I answered your question?
Yeah, you did. Like, I knew the answer already, but I just thought it would be nice for you to talk about it. Because I know you as a person, as a writer, so I kind of figured it would be your character's decisions. You don't sit there and kind of plot your characters' lives, whereas I do. I'm just there, like, I treat my characters like I'm playing Sims. Just take control of all of it.
Although, to be fair, people say I don't. You say I don't plot, but sometimes I do plot, and but it's not like it's never detailed plotting, if that makes sense. Like I'm always aware that the characters are going to have to be together at the end of and I always write towards a happy ever after. It's not like I don't, and I do actually make some kind of notes and plots in my head. And as you know, for my next series, I'm actually having to do quite a lot of working out because of the way that their lives are so intertwined with each other. But yeah, I think I always know that they're going to have happy ever after. It's not like that is never in doubt, you know. I just don't always know what form it will take.
Yeah.
And that's actually quite fun, because then I can go, oh, I didn't know that you were going to end like this. Well, okay then. You know.
And is it fair to say that epilogues is usually kind of like where we see a happy ever after?
I think I would actually say it's about 50. Now I think epilogues are more prevalent, whereas before I don't think that they were so prevalent. But now everyone seems to be doing epilogues, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like prologues and epilogues. I don't
So
know.
do I.
I do like them. I just kind of feel like, oh, we're at the epilogue now. But it's like what happens is when I'm reading a romance book, the chapter right before the epilogue is kind of like where they've said I love you or whatever. And you're content in your heart, but then the epilogue for me is always like, oh, how do I describe it? It's like, you know, when you've finished watching a really good movie and then you're content, but then it's like 1 year later, and then you're like, you get really excited because you kind of want to see what's happened 1 year later. That's what epilogues to me are like. It's kind of like it's like the pretty bow that ties everything together. And that's why I like epilogues, because I'm like, oh, I'm just going to get that cherry on the top of the cake, even though I don't like cherries on top of cakes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I also like epilogues, and then there's some cases that I don't like epilogues.
But then at the same time, I when I am reading a book, if I know that it's part of a series, and then I see that there's an epilogue, my immediate thought is going to be, okay, is this going to be a happy epilogue, or is this going to be an epilogue that tells me that there's going to be something that will potentially derail this couple in the next book? Because an epilogue can also work in that respect, where you see the happily for now, but then the epilogue is like, it kind of has a sense of impending adventure for that couple, in like an exciting way, which kind of then makes you want to pick up book 2, because you're like, oh, that epilogue was crazy, like the characters have no idea what's happening. Sometimes the epilogue is just a message to the readers so that the characters don't know what's going to happen, but we know what's going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't read many books like that.
No, neither have I, but I feel like I
However,
need to do something like that.
I have read. Okay, this is something that does annoy me, right? When someone is writing a series of, like a series, but they're standalone couples. That makes sense. I really hate it when you get the happy ever after of that couple,
Yeah.
and then they do an epilogue that's about the next couple, and I'm like, no, I don't want to see an epilogue about another couple when I've got my happy ever after for this couple. I don't mind if in the last chapter they have some kind of hint of the next book, but I don't want to see the epilogue where it switches fucking point of view to another completely different character to entice me. I don't like that, because I'm like, this book is not about those fucking other characters, is it? It's about this couple. And I feel cheated at that point, because I'm like, excuse me, why are you including this epilogue? Or why? And I've seen a chapter that switches point of view to another complete other character, and I'm like,
But then my question is, in that
it's
book,
really
has it been consistent in having multiple
No.
Okay, so then that's just like, that's not fair.
Exactly. That's when I get really angry. I'm like, if it's not that, yes, fine. If it's the POV of the hero and the heroine, that's fine. But I don't want to then see some other random fucking person in an epilogue, like, that has never been there before.
Yeah,
I'm like, who is this person?
I
Like,
understand. I see.
like, who are you? Why are you setting up the next book like this? You could just more easily have set up the next book by giving some kind of like hint of it in the last chapter. I don't mind if they do that, but I don't want an epilogue from another person's point of view. It's just not like when that couple's romance is wrapped up. I'm like, that makes me annoyed, because I'm like, oh, because I think that I'm getting an epilogue from that couple, and then suddenly it's some other person And you're like, excuse me? Like, who does this? I hate it. I really, really hate it. And it's becoming more and more prevalent, and it fucking pisses me off.
Well,
I'm going to say that now.
I've not seen that, actually. I don't think I want to. But...
just hope you don't. Maybe I've been reading too much contemporary romance. I don't know. But it just seems to be more. And it's just doing my head in. And I'm like, I don't want this anymore. Please stop doing it. Just a message to authors. Please stop doing that. Like, this doesn't make it makes it very unsatisfying for me, because I'm like, well, now I'm going to have to read this next book. I don't really want to read this. What if I don't want to read about this next couple? What if I'm happy with just having read this couple? I'm just like, fuck you. Like, genuinely, fuck you. Because now, instead of feeling happy and content with the end of the story, I now have this fucking cliffhanger thing. And it's like, this is supposed to be a standalone. So why are you making it?
It's because the author wants people. They want to entice readers to read the next book.
I know, but if they're gonna, why don't you fucking not do an epilogue and trick me into thinking there's more of that couple?
They could easily just hint at.
Or they could have like put the bloody blurb for the next one on, or they could have made that fucking epilogue the chapter 1 of the next book and put. Even though I don't like reading other books,
I know.
But they could have done it that way, and I would have been okay with that, because I would have been able to skip it. But no, because it's designated as another chapter in this book. I'm just like, nah, man, this is some shady practices, and I'm not down with it. It's fucking shady, man. I'm just saying this. It's a shady practice, and I'm not down with it, and it annoys me, because I'm like, I want my happy ever after about this couple. I don't want it about some other random fucking couple. I'm sorry, but no. Just...
I'm sorry, I love it. I love it when you explain. It's so funny.
It's just such an annoying thing, because it ruins my happy ever after. I'm like, I invested in this book. I invested in this couple. And sometimes it's happened where it's like a ton of, like, it's books, and I've invested in this couple, and suddenly it's like, I'm just like, shh. You've just ruined my enjoyment of this happy ever after. I'm not going to forgive you for that.
Wow.
Oh, God. Okay, and another thing that annoys me is when the happy ever after is feels cheap, or the couple, I feel like they don't deserve the happy ever after.
Okay, so you're gonna have to maybe elaborate a little bit more. Give me an example.
Okay, I'll give you an example of this book series that I read, and actually one of my friends has also read it. I hated this. I ended up hating the heroine to the point where I wanted to throw her in a bin and set it on fire. And I didn't understand why this hero liked this heroine, because she was so stupid. And I went through 4 books of this couple, and then their happy ever after was just so, like, he suddenly he had gone through this book being this really like cold-hearted guy, and yes, he was occasionally soft, but right at the end of the book, he just completely changed and flipped into this like really loving person. One, I didn't want him to be in love with this woman, because I thought he deserved better than her stupidity. And 2, he just changed into this like, I love you so much, we're so in love. And like literally 2 chapters before, they were like,
Was this in the first book?
No, this is in the last book.
So my question is, if you hated this heroine so much from book 1,
what? No, I didn't hate her in book 1.
Oh, okay, so when did you hate her?
I started to hate her in book 3, and then I decided, and then I actually stopped reading at that point. And then my friend was reading it, and she was talking about it to me, and I said, I'm going to have to read the last book. Okay. And so I did, and then I ended up hating it, and then I've never read this author again, because she did this, and she was also did another fucking chapter at the end of the book from another person's point of view to advertise the next series. And I was like, you fuck off, man. But yes, I got annoyed, and this fucking heroine just got worse in the last book, to the point where I actually full on hated this heroine. And then I ended up hating the hero, even though I'd liked him before, because he just changed his personality, like at a flip of a switch. And I was like, just feels cheap and not deserved. Anyway, sorry. That's failure on. There you go. If you switch characters up magically in the last kind of section of the book, I'm not going to be happy with you. You have to keep personalities consistent. Yes, the person can change throughout a book, but if you suddenly change him like in a sudden, or a character suddenly straight away, like, and make them into this loving like guy when he was a complete, not like that before, then I'm going to be like, how is this believable? Here we are talking about what doesn't constitute a happy ending for Sarah. Oh God. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense? Right?
Yeah, you are. You always make sense.
Good. Because it just annoys me, because then I just feel like, well, I don't want you two to be together. And also, what is this person? This is not the person I've been reading for 4 books. Oh, sorry.
I don't like cheap happily ever afters. I'd get so disappointed. I don't like it if I feel like a couple isn't it. If I feel like I don't believe in their romance. It just doesn't work for me. Okay, unpopular opinion. 365 DNI.
Oh God.
I just did not believe in their relationship. I didn't believe in their relationship. And for me, I just felt that it was just structured poorly. And I know that women have gone absolutely insane over the sex scenes, which were done well, yeah. But
okay, the sex scenes were the only good thing about that film. Everything else was a bit shit.
For me, I want to believe in romance, okay? And I wanted that. There was literally no. Yeah.
There was sexual chemistry, but there wasn't romantic chemistry, and that's where I had a problem. Because then it's like, people complain about like couples getting into bed way too quickly and stuff like that, and I'm like, but that happens in real life. But then you want to see their journey to falling in love, and if you don't have that, then you're just like, well, like I've written books where couples have got to have sex very, very fast, but they don't fall in love with each other at that point. You see their building of their relationship, and then they fall in love with each other. And I'm like, you can write a book where they have lots of sex, but they're not in love, because that's happens in real life, people. And anyone who says that's unrealistic, well, you clearly haven't been in the world enough. Because it is very realistic. But I know what you mean. Where I was coming from is that if you don't see them have that connection on an emotional level, or they connect as friends, then your romance is always going to feel cheap, because it's just at the end of the day about their sexual chemistry, and that's not very. As whilst we both love reading, we both love sex and reading about sex. That's not what we read romance for. We read romance to see the development of a couple, and in that film, or obviously we haven't read the books because it's not been translated from Polish, but in that film there was no romance between the two characters. It was purely a sexual thing, and yet they tried to force it on us that they were like, I'm in love with this guy, and I was like, when the fuck did you fall in love with him? Like,
yeah, I just
okay, I'm gonna say this: she was stigmatized. Plain and simple, she was stigmatized, and that is all the only way. And she was stigmatized, and that is she clearly was in love with this dick. And that's really all I've got to say about that film.
So yeah, that's basic. So the whole point of me bringing up this film is because we were talking about relationships and believing in them. Well, that was kind of like my view, is that if I feel that a couple hasn't convinced me of their love, then it's just not going to convince me that they're happy in the end, or that it's just something's missing. Like, I feel like, yeah, cheated, or like, yeah, I feel like I've wasted my time in giving something a chance like this. But yeah, so I totally get what you mean. I get what you mean by cheap happy ever afters and stuff. I get it.
It's frustrating because we've invested so much time into these characters, and you kind of just feel like, well, why did I read that? Because I don't really care that you're together. Although now, I used to like be very strict about finishing every book I read. Now I'm just like, I don't have time for this. I told you actually that I DNF'd 4 books in a row, didn't I?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And they were all romance.
And also, I know that you were quite frustrated with the fact that you were reading an romance and it was just strictly all about sex, I think, and it read like porn or something like that, and you were just,
oh god, not that book.
Yeah, you were really frustrated.
Don't even talk that. I think we actually discussed that slightly last week. No, I saw this. It's an erotic romance series that was like, it's seriously very popular, and I was like, I'll give it a go. And I saw, because I've got Kindle Unlimited, and some Kindle Unlimited titles you can also get the audio for free. So I ended up going, I'll listen to this on audio, because I don't know why I was in the mood for doing that. I listened to this entire 13, and I think it was like 13 and a half hours, or even maybe it was 14 hours. I don't even remember. And I would have to say 80% of that listening was sexual in nature. And it was just like, it read like straight sex, which also I was not a fan of. And yeah, I hated it. It was basically like listening to porn, and not in a good way, because I didn't sign up to be listening to porn. Okay. When I read a book, I actually want to believe in this couple, but I didn't. It was so stupid. And I never want to listen to that again. I never want to go through that again. And there's 6 books in that series, and I was like, you know what? No. And I gave this book 2 stars, and the only reason I gave it 2 stars, it should have got 1, but I gave it an extra 1 star, or an extra star, because I thought, poor narrator having to narrate this entire book that's basically sex. I'm like, yes, I have lots of sex in my books, but I do not have sex 24/7. Anyway, that was like a couple of months ago. Now, like this week, I DNF'd 4 romance books in a row, and I feel really terrible about it, but I'm very picky about romance. I think we were talking about this, weren't we? But let's not go into that, because I don't really want people to be. That's not what this podcast is about.
Yeah, that's true.
But what I was trying to kind of say is, if I don't believe in a couple, like, or if I don't believe in a story, I don't read it unless I like really, really want to review a book. Then I really will just not finish it, because I just can't be bothered. I don't have time for it anymore. I just don't. I don't have time to be reading stuff I'm not enjoying. Like, I think it's actually quite freeing to be able to just stop reading books that you don't like.
Oh yeah, like so many people do it. I do it. If I feel like something's not doing it for me, I just stop. It's no biggie.
No, but I think it was drilled into me, like when I was younger, that you have to finish what you start. You have to finish something you start, and so I was always like, I need to finish every book I read. And now I'm like, actually, no, I don't. Because I have more important things to do, like writing. So when I read, I do it for fun, and if I'm not enjoying it, and I'm like, why am I doing this? So that's kind of where I'm at now with So yeah, I always kind of want to be invested in a couple, so that when I get to the happy ever after, I'm like, yes, satisfied, I'm happy. or you get that warm fuzzy feeling in your chest, like I'm so happy they're finally together.
Yeah, it's like it's just getting to the end and being like, oh, do you know what? I'm well happy. I can say goodbye to this couple. I'm sad too, but I can say goodbye to them happily, knowing that everything's all good between them, and you know, that's that.
Hmm.
You know, you want to have that warm, content feeling in your heart and just be like, oh yeah, this journey was worth it.
Exactly. That's the most important thing, actually, for a happy ever after, is you have to feel like it's worth, they earned it.
Yeah.
And I think not many people realize that, is that, in order for it to be a successful happy ever after, the couple have had to earn that happy ever after. Like, otherwise I'm just going to be like, well, I don't know that you actually deserve this, man. Just saying. That makes me sound like I have such high demands on these romance books.
No,
It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go through like a million things of drama. They just have to have had a journey that feels worthy of them having a happy ever after.
That's exactly what it is. That's all it is. That's all it is.
Exactly. They don't have to have, like, I know that I write massively high angst books, but drama filled. That's the nature of the subgenre, okay? But I like reading some fluffy romances as well, where it's like it's not like complicated, and then
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I've read those and I feel perfectly content afterwards. I'm like, oh,
I like those kind of cute romances. I do. I love them. When it's not so much drama, but it's like it's enjoyable romance. Like it's just smooth kind of. It just it takes me back to the fluffy romances that I used to read. Those are the ones that you just what you're getting, and you can just easily just dive into them, and it's like a dose of happiness. I can't really describe it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Exactly. Whereas it's like I have to be in the mood for those,
Yeah.
And normally I just want drama. I'm not gonna lie. I just want drama, and I'm like, I need to feel like I'm going on some wild ride where I'm on the edge of my seat. See, I'm gonna put this out there. I don't like drama in my own life, but watching other people's drama, yes, please.
I agree.
Probably why I like drama in books is because I like reading other people's drama. But like in my own life, I'm like, get away with your drama. Stay out of my way. Oh gosh. Anyway, that's kind of not really what this podcast is about, is it?
But when we do podcast episodes, it's like we just go on this merry-go-round of randomness and eventually find our way back to the topic. Kind of what it is.
True.
So yeah,
this is very true.
The takeaway: don't kill your characters.
And don't kill your characters.
Don't kill them and label it as a romance, because it's not.
Exactly. Don't do that. Make sure your characters deserve their happy ever after. Don't give us cheap happy ever afters. But as always, make sure you do give us a happy ever after, otherwise we'll come at you. Am I right? Oh no, your microphone's died.
I'm here.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I had your back. I was like, yeah, totally. But obviously, it got cut out. But yeah, I totally agree.
Totally. So I think that just about wraps up our random discussion about happy ever afters.
It was
I hope.
Yeah, it was a struggle, but we got there.
I hope it's been enlightening about what we like in a happy ever after.
And what we don't. And what we don't.
Yes, what we hate. Because we always like to be balanced on this podcast and talk about what we love and what we hate.
Yeah.
So that was the Maiden Romance podcast, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.